Chapter 15. Speaking to Inform. Haley Walden is the chief designer at a fast-growing company that creates and sells stylish, innovative knitwear. On a bright Tuesday in October, Haley begins her workday by talking to a colleague from technical support about the computer problem she's been having. She demonstrates what goes wrong when she boots up and details the problems with the internal backup system. Later that morning, Haley has a long meeting with other members of her design team. They discuss their new line of products for the spring, going over everything from the manufacturing process to the marketing campaign. As the other staff members talk, Haley takes careful notes and asks questions to make sure she understands every aspect of the spring product launch. In the afternoon, Haley rushes to a meeting with company executives, including the president, so she can report on what the design team discussed earlier in the day. She reviews the manufacturing process for the new knits, discusses the distribution chain for the company's goods, and explains different options for marketing a new line of spring jackets. Afterward, the president compliments Haley for giving such a clear presentation. Anyone who can communicate that well, the president says, is going to go a long way in this company. Haley doesn't consider herself a public speaker, but much of her job involves absorbing and communicating information clearly and effectively. Although Haley is just a single person, her experience is not unusual. In one survey, graduates from 5 U.S. colleges were asked to rank the speech skills most important to their jobs. They rated informative speaking number 1. In another survey, 62% of the respondents said they use informative speaking almost constantly. Public speaking to inform occurs in a wide range of everyday situations. The business manager explains the next year's budget. The architect reviews plans for a new building. The union leader informs members about a new contract. The church worker outlines plans for a fund drive. There are endless situations in which people need to inform others. Competence in this form of communication will prove valuable to you throughout your life. One of your first classroom assignments probably will be to deliver an informative speech in which you will act as a lecturer or teacher. You may describe an object, show how something works, report on an event, explain a concept. Your aim will be to convey knowledge and understanding, not to advocate a cause. Your speech will be judged in light of 3 general criteria. Is the information communicated accurately? Is the information communicated clearly? Is the information made meaningful and interesting to the audience? In this chapter, we will look at 4 types of informative speeches and the basic principles of informative speaking. Along the way, we will apply various general principles discussed in previous chapters. Types of informative speeches: analysis and organization. There are many ways to classify informative speeches. Here, we focus on the kinds you are most likely to give in your speech. 1. Speeches about objects. 2. Speeches about processes. 3. Speeches about events. And 4. Speeches about concepts. Speeches about objects. As the word is used here, objects include anything that is visible, tangible, and stable in form. Objects may have moving parts or be alive. They may include places, structures, animals, even people. Here are examples of subjects for speeches about objects. E-book readers, service dogs, human eye, Susan B. Anthony, titanium, Golden Gate Bridge. You will not have time to tell your classmates everything about any of these subjects. Instead, you will choose a specific purpose that focuses on one aspect of your subject. Working from the topics presented above, the following are examples of good specific purpose statements for informative speeches about objects. To inform my audience about 3 major kinds of service dogs. To inform my audience about the role of Susan B. Anthony in the U.S. women's rights movement. To inform my audience what to look for when buying an ebook reader. Notice how precise these statements are. As we saw in Chapter 5, you should select a specific purpose that is not too broad to achieve in the allotted time. To inform my audience about Pablo Picasso is far too general for a classroom speech. To inform my audience about the major contributions of Pablo Picasso to modern art is more precise and is a purpose you could reasonably hope to achieve in a brief talk. If your specific purpose is to explain the history or evolution of your subject, you will put your speech in chronological order. For example, specific purpose: to inform my audience about the major achievements of Frederick Douglass. Central idea: although born in slavery, Frederick Douglass became one of the greatest figures in American history. Main points: 1. Douglass spent the first 20 years of his life as a slave in Maryland. 2. After escaping to the North, Douglass became a leader in the abolitionist movement to end slavery. 3. During the Civil War, Douglass helped establish black regiments in the Union Army. 4. After the war, Douglass was a tireless champion of equal rights for his race. If your specific purpose is to describe the main features of your subject, you may organize your speech in spatial order. Specific purpose: to inform my audience about the design of the St. Louis Arch. Central idea: the St. Louis Arch is divided into 3 sections, each with its own attractions. Main points: 1. The base of the St. Louis Arch houses a visitor center with a museum, 2 movie theaters, and retail outlets. 2. The middle of the St. Louis Arch contains a high-speed tram that carries visitors from the base to the top. 3. The top of the St. Louis Arch has an observation deck 630 feet above the ground. As often as not, you will find that speeches about objects fall into topical order. For example, specific purpose: to inform my audience about the 4 major elements of a Japanese garden. Central idea: the 4 major elements of a Japanese garden are stones, sand, water, and plants. Main points: 1. The first element of a Japanese garden is stones, which symbolize mountains and islands. 2. The second element of a Japanese garden is sand, which symbolizes the sea or other vast areas. 3. The third element of a Japanese garden is water, which symbolizes purity and life. 4. The fourth element of a Japanese garden is plants, which symbolize life and the changing seasons. No matter which of these organizational methods you use, chronological, spatial, or topical, be sure to follow the guidelines discussed in Chapter 9. 1. Limit your speech to between 2 and 5 main points. 2. Keep main points separate. 3. Try to use the same pattern of wording for all main points. 4. Balance the amount of time devoted to each main point. Speeches about processes. A process is a systematic series of actions that leads to a specific result or product. Speeches about processes explain how something is made, how something is done, or how something works. Here are examples of good specific purpose statements for speeches about processes. To inform my audience how U.S. currency is made. To inform my audience how to write an effective job resume. To inform my audience how hurricanes develop. As these examples suggest, there are 2 kinds of informative speeches about processes. One kind explains a process so that listeners will understand it better. Your goal is to have your audience know the steps of the processes and how they relate to one another. If your specific purpose is to inform my audience how a nuclear power plant works, you will explain the basic procedures of a nuclear power plant. You will not instruct your listeners on how they can operate a nuclear power plant. The second kind of speech explains a process so listeners will be better able to perform the process themselves. Your goal in this kind of speech is to have the audience learn a skill. Suppose your specific purpose is to inform my audience how to take pictures like a professional photographer. You will present photographic techniques and show your listeners how they can utilize them. You want the audience to be able to use the techniques as a result of your speech. Both kinds of speeches about processes may require visual aids. At the very least, you should prepare a chart outlining the steps or techniques of your process. In some cases, you will need to demonstrate the steps or techniques by performing them in front of your audience. One student did sleight of hand magic tricks to show the techniques behind them. Another executed elementary Tai Chi maneuvers. In each case, the demonstration not only clarified the speaker's process, but captivated the audience as well. If you are using visual aids of any kind, be sure to review Chapter 14. When informing about a process, you will usually arrange your speech in chronological order, explaining the process step by step from beginning to end. For example, specific purpose: to inform my audience about the major rituals of a traditional Bengali wedding in India. Central idea: a traditional Bengali wedding consists of a series of rituals that take place before, during, and after the wedding ceremony. Main points: 1. Pre-wedding rituals include giving gifts to the bride and groom and dressing the bride in traditional fashion. 2. Rituals during the wedding ceremony include an exchange of garlands between the bride and the groom, the chanting of mantras, and the giving away of the bride by her uncle. 3. Post-wedding rituals include a celebration at the home of the bride's family, a reception at the home of the groom's family, and the formal exit of the bride and groom. Sometimes, rather than moving through a process step by step, you will focus on the major principles or techniques involved in performing the process. Then you will organize your speech in topical order. Each main point will deal with a separate principle or technique. For example, specific purpose: to inform my audience of the common methods by stage magicians to perform their tricks. Central idea: stage magicians use two common methods to perform their tricks: mechanical devices and sleight of hand. Main points: 1. Many tricks rely on mechanical devices that may require little skill by the magician. 2. Other magic tricks depend on the magician's skill in fooling people by sleight of hand manipulation. Concise organization is especially important in speeches about processes. You must make sure each step is clear and easy to follow. If your process has more than 4 or 5 steps, group the steps into units to limit the number of main points. For example, in a speech explaining how to set up a home aquarium, a student presented the following main points. 1. First, you must choose the size of your tank. 2. Then you must determine the shape of your tank. 3. You must also decide how much you can afford to pay for a tank. 4. Once you have the tank, you need a filter system. 5. A heater is absolutely necessary. 6. You must also get an air pump. 7. Once this is done, you need to choose gravel for the tank. 8. You will also need plants. 9. Other decorations will round out the effects of your aquarium. 10. Now you are ready to add the fish. 11. Fresh water fish are the most common. 12. Saltwater fish are more expensive and require special care. Not surprisingly, this was too much for the audience to follow. The speaker should have organized the points something like this. 1. The first step in establishing a home aquarium is choosing a tank. A. The size of the tank is important. B. The shape of the tank is important. C. The cost of the tank is important. 2. The second step in establishing a home aquarium is equipping the tank. A. You will need a filter system. B. You will need a heater. C. You will need an air pump. D. You will need gravel. E. You will need plants. F. You may also want other decorations. 3. The third step in establishing a home aquarium is adding the fish. A. Freshwater fish are the most common for home aquariums. B. Saltwater fish are more expensive and require special care. The subpoints cover the same territory as the original 12 points, but 3 main points are much easier to understand and remember. Speeches about events. The Random House Dictionary defines an event as anything that happens or is regarded as happening. By definition, the following are examples of suitable subjects for informative speeches about events: Festival of the Sun, cyber terrorism, therapeutic massage, sleep deprivation, bag of Little Bighorn, Olympic Games. As usual, you will need to narrow your focus and pick a specific purpose you can accomplish in a short speech. Here are examples of good specific purpose statements for informative speeches about events. To inform my audience about the events at Peru's Festival of the Sun ceremony. To inform my audience about the major types of therapeutic massage. To inform my audience about what occurred at the Battle of Little Bighorn. There are many ways to discuss events. If your specific purpose is to recount the history of an event, you will organize your speech in chronological order, relating to the incidents one after another in the order they occurred. For example, specific purpose: to inform my audience about the history of Paralympics. Central idea: Olympic-style games for athletes with physical disabilities have made great strides since the first competition more than 60 years ago. Main points. 1. What would eventually become the Paralympics began in 1948 with a sports competition in Great Britain involving World War II veterans with spinal cord injuries. 2. In 1952, the event expanded when athletes from the Netherlands took part. 3. In 1960, the first Paralympic Games for international athletes took place in Rome. 4. In 2001, an agreement was signed officially holding the Paralympics Games alongside the Summer and Winter Olympic Games. You can approach an event from almost any angle or combination of angles, features, origins, implications, benefits, future developments, and so forth. In such cases, you will put your speech together in topical order, and you should make sure your main points subdivide the subject logically and consistently. For instance, specific purpose: to inform my audience about 3 aspects of the Mardi Gras celebration in New Orleans. Central idea: the Mardi Gras celebration in New Orleans is renowned for its parades, costumes, and food. Main points. 1. The parades are lavish events that take place over the course of several weeks. 2. The costumes include disguises, medallions, and the official Mardi Gras colors of purple, green, and gold. 3. The food features Cajun and Creole dishes common to southern Louisiana. Speeches about concepts. Concepts include beliefs, theories, ideas, principles, and the like. They are more abstract than objects, processes, or events. The following are examples of subjects for speeches about concepts. Confucianism, original intent doctrine, string theory, nutritional theories, philosophies of education, numerology. Taking a few of these general subjects, here are some specific purpose statements for speeches about concepts. To inform my audience about the basic principles of Confucianism. To inform my audience about the doctrine of original intent in constitutional interpretation. To inform my audience about different philosophies of education in Asia and the United States. Speeches about concepts are usually organized in a topical order and focus on the main features or aspects of your concept. For example, specific purpose: to inform my audience about the basic principles of nonviolent resistance. Central idea: the basic principles of nonviolent resistance stress using moral means to achieve social change, refusing to inflict violence on one's enemies, and using suffering as a social force. Main points. 1. The first major principle of nonviolent resistance is that social change must be achieved by moral means. 2. The second major principle of nonviolent resistance is that one should not inflict violence on one's enemies. 3. The third major principle of nonviolent resistance is that suffering can be a powerful social force. Another approach is to define the concept you are dealing with. Identify its major elements and illustrate it with specific examples. An excellent instance of this came in a student speech about film theory. Specific purpose: to inform my audience about different approaches to film theory. Central idea: approaches to film theory include outer theory, structuralist theory, and genre theory. Main points. 1. Outer theory focuses on the director's creative vision in the construction of a film. 2. Structuralist theory, it focuses on how film conveys meaning through the use of codes and conventions. 3. Genre theory focuses on patterns across major types of films such as drama, comedy, science fiction, and the like. Speeches about concepts are often more complex than other kinds of informative speeches. When dealing with concepts, pay special attention to avoiding technical language, to defining terms clearly, and using examples and comparisons to illustrate the concepts. Look, for example, at video 15.1 in the online media library for this chapter, which presents an excerpt from a student speech about the Chinese philosophy of Confucianism. Notice how the student defines Confucianism and then explains its unifying principle of Zhen. If you give an informative speech about a concept, give special thought to how you can make that concept clear and comprehensible to your listeners. The lines dividing speeches about objects, processes, events, and concepts are not absolute. Some subjects could fit into more than one category depending on how you develop the speech. For example, a speech about the destruction of ancient Pompeii by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius would probably deal with its subject as an event, but a speech on what causes volcanoes to erupt would most likely treat its subject as a process. The important step is to decide whether you will handle your subject as an object, a process, an event, or a concept. Once you do that, you can develop the speech accordingly. Regardless of how you approach your topic, be sure to give listeners plenty of help in sorting out facts and ideas. One way is by using enough transitions, internal previews, internal summaries, and signposts. See Chapter 9. Another way is to follow the old maxim, tell them what you're going to say it, then tell them what you've said. In other words, preview the main points of your speech in the introduction and summarize them in the conclusion. This will make your speech easier to understand and easier to remember. Guidelines for informative speaking. All of the previous chapters of this book relate to the principles of informative speaking. Selecting a topic and specific purpose, analyzing the audience, gathering materials, choosing supporting details, organizing the speech, using words to communicate meaning, delivering the speech, all must be done effectively if an informative speech is to be a success. Here, we emphasize 6 additional points that will help make yours a success. Don't overestimate what the audience knows. In speech about meteorology, a student said if modern methods of weather forecasting had existed in 1900s, the Galveston hurricane disaster would never have taken place. Then he was off to other matters, leaving his listeners to puzzle over what the Galveston hurricane was, when it happened, and what kind of destruction it wreaked. The speaker assumed his audience already knew these things, but they were not experts on meteorology or American history. Even those who had heard of the hurricane only had a fuzzy notion of it. When the speaker knew that the hurricane, which killed more than 6,000 people when it unexpectedly struck on September 8, 1900, is still the deadliest natural disaster in American history. As many speakers have discovered, it is easy to overestimate the audience's stock of information. In most informative speeches, your listeners will be only vaguely knowledgeable at best about the details of your topic. You cannot assume that they will know what you mean. Rather, you must be sure to explain everything so thoroughly that they cannot help but understand. As you work on your speech, always consider whether it will be clear to someone who is hearing about the topic for the first time. Suppose you're talking about bulletproof vests. Surely all of your classmates have heard of bulletproof vests, but most probably don't know how vests work. How will you tell them? Here's one way. Ballistic vests, more commonly known as bulletproof vests, are pieces of personal body armor that protect human beings from damage incurred by explosively propelled projectiles. How? Intricately woven synthetic fibers such as Kevlar form a powerful mesh that laterally disperses a projectile's kinetic energy while at the same time deforming the projectile and stopping its momentum. To someone who knows a lot about physics or textiles, this is probably perfectly clear, but someone who does not may get lost along the way. The tone of the statement is that of a speaker reviewing information already familiar to the audience, not of a speaker introducing new information. Here, in contrast, is another explanation of bulletproof vests. So how do bulletproof vests actually stop bullets? Let me explain with an example. Imagine a police officer investigating a strange noise down a dark alley. He startles a drug dealer trying to make a sale, and before he knows it, bang. Luckily, the officer was wearing his bulletproof vest. Instead of entering the officer's body, the bullet enters layer upon layer of strong, tightly woven fibers. Because of their strength and intricate pattern, the fibers begin to twist and deform the bullet. The fibers are so strong that they flatten the bullet out and absorb its energy. While the bullet may go through a couple of layers of fabric, it stops well before going through the entire vest. Thanks to these strong, tightly woven fibers, our police officers' lives our police officer lives to put the drug dealer in cuffs. This explanation is clear and simple. Its tone is that of a teacher unraveling a new subject. Is it too simple? Not at all. The test of a good speaker is to communicate even the most complex ideas clearly and simply. Anyone can go to a book and find a learned-sounding definition of a bulletproof vest. But to say in plain English how bulletproof vest works, that takes hard work and creative thinking. Also, remember that readers can study a printed passage again and again until they extract its meaning, but listeners don't have that luxury. They must understand what you say in the time it takes you to say it. The more you assume they know about the topic, the greater your chances of being misunderstood. Relate the subject directly to the audience. The British dramatist Oscar Wilde arrived at his club after the disastrous opening night performance of his new play. "Oscar, how did your play go?" asked a friend. "Oh," Wilde quipped, "the play was a great success, but the audience was a failure." Speakers have been known to give too much the same answer in saving face after a dismal informative speech. "Oh," they say, "the speech was fine, but the audience wasn't interested." And they are at least partly right. The audience wasn't interested. But there is no such thing as a fine speech that puts people to sleep. It's the speaker's job to get listeners interested and to keep them interested. Informative speakers have one big hurdle to overcome. They must recognize what is fascinating to them may not be fascinating to everybody. Once you have chosen a topic that could possibly be interesting to your listeners, you should take special steps to relate it to them. You should tie it in with their interests and concerns. Start in the introduction. Instead of saying, "I want to talk to you about chili peppers," you could say, Imagine your mouth burning like wildfire, your eyes squirting out uncontrollable tears, and your face red and sweating profusely. Are you sick? No. You just took a bite of a screaming hot chili pepper. Congratulations. You're partaking in a worldwide tradition that has been spicing up lives and diets for thousands of years. But don't stop with the introduction. Whenever you can, put your listeners into the body of the speech. After all, nothing interests people more than themselves. Find ways to talk about your topic in terms of your listeners. Bring your material home to them. Get it as close to them as possible. Here's an example. You say you are explaining how bed bugs spread from person to person and location to location. You have plenty of facts and could recite them like this. High traffic areas provide ideal environmental conditions for bed bugs to spread. High density locations such as dormitories, apartment buildings, and transportation terminals are among the most likely places to find bed bugs. Because bed bugs are attracted to items that allow them to hide, they often attach themselves to clothing, backpacks, purses, and the like. Bed bugs also thrive in cluttered locations that have a lot of items lying about. This is valuable information, but is not related to the audience. Let's try again. Bed bugs spread most rapidly in places that have lots of people coming in and out. If you live in the dorms or an apartment, if you travel through airports, train stations, and bus stations, or if you stay in hotels and motels, you're passing through prime breeding grounds for bed bugs. Bed bugs are like tiny hitchhikers. They'll insert themselves in your clothes, your luggage, your purse, your backpack, and your coat. Anything that has fabric and folds. Bed bugs are also drawn to locations where they can hide easily. So the more clutter you have in your environment, the more bed bugs will like your tiny companions. Look at the frequent use of you and your. The facts are the same, but now they are pointed directly at the audience. Research shows that using personal terms such as you and your in an informative speech significantly increases audiences' understanding of the speaker's ideas. Don't be too technical. What does it mean to say that an informative speech is too technical? It may mean the subject matter is too specialized for the audience. Any subject can be popularized, but only up to a point. The important thing for a speaker to know is what can't be explained to an ordinary audience and what cannot. Say your subject is power amplifiers. It's no trick to demonstrate how to operate an amplifier, how to turn it on and off, adjust the volume, set the tone, and balance controls. It is also relatively easy to explain what an amplifier does. It boosts the sound received from a DVD, iPod, or live performance. But to give a full scientific account of how an amplifier works cannot be done in any reasonable time unless the audience knows the principles of audio technology. The material is just too technical to be understood by a general audience. Even when the subject matter is not technical, the language used to explain it may be. Every activity has its jargon, whether it be golf, boogie wedge, match play, chemistry, colloid, glycogen, heavy water, or financial analysis, covered call, reverse bid, toehold acquisition. If you are talking to a group of specialists, you can use technical words and be understood, but you must do all you can to avoid technical words when informing a general audience such as your speech class. Here, for instance, are two statements explaining stem cells and the roles they can play in the human body. The first is heavily laden with specialized language that would have little impact on ordinary listeners. Most multicellular organisms contain stem cells that reinvigorate themselves through the process of mitotic cellular division. Stem cells in early embryos represent basic units of life in higher organisms, while adult stem cells in somatic tissues represent cellular stores capable of regenerating tissue and maintaining organ functions. Both are characterized by properties that permit accurate in vivo cell copying. The second statement is perfectly understandable and shows how technical information can be made clear to the average person. According to the National Institute of Health, stem cells are general cells that have the potential to develop into any of the more than 200 different kinds of cells in the human body. Basically, they turn into a cell that has a specific job to do. For example, stem cells might become muscle cells that help rebuild damaged tissue. They might become red blood cells that help deliver oxygen to different tissues, or they might become brain cells that help the nervous system function. No matter what type of cells need assistance, stem cells can come to the rescue and replenish the cells our bodies need. The Genetics Learning Center at the University of Utah explains it like this. Stem cells are like actors waiting for a casting call, just as an actor waits to find out his or her next role. Stem cells can wait for signals from the body that tell them what to become. Once they get those signals, they begin to change into specific cells with specific jobs to do. Much clearer, isn't it? The only specialized words in the whole passage are stem cells. The rest of the language is straightforward. The idea is easy to grasp. This is what you should strive for in your informative speeches. Avoid abstractions. My task, said the novelist Joseph Conrad, is before all to make you see, and make the reader see is just what Conrad did. Witness this passage in which Conrad describes the aftermath of an explosion aboard a ship. The first person I saw was Mahone, with eyes like saucers, his mouth open, and the long white hair standing straight on the end round his head like a silver halo. I stared at him in unbelief, and he stared at me with a queer kind of shocked curiosity. I did not know that I had no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, that my young mustache was burnt off and my face was black, one cheek laid open and my nose cut, and my chin bleeding. A speech is not a novel. Still, many informative speeches would be vastly improved by the novelist bent for color, specificity, and detail. One way to avoid abstractions is through description. When we think of description, we usually think of external events such as the explosion described by Conrad, but description is also used to communicate internal feelings. Here is how one student tried to convey his audience the sensations he experienced when he first began skydiving. As we wait for the plane to climb to the jump altitude of 12,000 feet, my mind races with a frenzied jumble of thoughts. Okay, this is the moment you've been waiting for. It's going to be great. Am I really going to jump out of an airplane from 12,000 feet? What if something goes wrong? Can I still back out? Come on now, don't worry, it'll be fine. Even if we have not been skydiving, we have all had the same kinds of emotions on similar occasions. So what happened next? Now it was time to jump. My palms are sweating and my heart is pounding, so hard that I think it may burst. Get ready, yells the instructor, as I jump into the blue. I wonder, what am I doing here? Yes, then what? The blast of air resistance blows me backward like a leaf at the mercy of an autumn wind. In about 10 seconds, my body levels out and accelerates to a speed of about 120 miles an hour. The air supports my body like an invisible flying carpet. There is no sound except for the wind rushing around my face. Any fears or doubts I had are gone, and the exhilaration of free flight. Every nerve in my body is alive with sensation, yet I am overcome by a peaceful feeling and the sense that I am one with the sky. As we listen to the speaker, we share his thoughts, feel his heart pound, and join his exhilaration as he floats effortlessly through the sky. The vivid description lends reality to the speech and draws us further in. Another way to escape abstractions is with comparisons that put your subject in concrete, familiar terms. Do you want to convey what would happen if a comet or a large asteroid struck the Earth? You could say this. If a comet or a large asteroid struck the Earth, the impact would be devastating. True, but the statement is vague and abstract. It does not communicate your meaning clearly and concretely. Now suppose you add this. To give you an idea of how devastating the impact would be, it would be like all the nuclear bombs in the world going off at one spot. Now you have made the abstract specific and given us a sharp new slant on things. Like comparison, contrast can put an idea into concrete terms. Suppose you want to make the point that a person's chances of winning a state lottery are extremely low. You would say, the odds, for example, of winning a state lottery are astronomical, 14 million to 1. The word astronomical suggests that you consider 14 million to 1 long odds. But long in comparison to what? The speaker offered this contrast. The odds of picking the correct 6-digit sequence in a typical state lottery are 14 million to 1. In contrast, the odds of getting hit by lightning are only 700,000 to 1. The odds of dying in a car accident are 6,000 to 1. In other words, the odds are much stronger that you will get hit by lightning or be killed in a car crash than that you will win the jackpot or in a state lottery. This puts an abstract fact into meaningful perspective. Personalize your ideas. Listeners want to be entertained as they are being enlightened. Nothing takes the edge off an informative speech more than an unbroken string of facts and figures, and nothing enlivens a speech more than personal illustrations. Whenever possible, you should try to personalize your ideas and dramatize them in human terms. Let's say you are talking about autism, the developmental disability marked by an impaired communication and interaction skills. You would surely note that the condition affects 1 in every 500 children, occurs 4 times more frequently in males than in females, and is more prevalent among Caucasians. You would also note that the symptoms of autism include abnormal introversion, severely limited use of language, repetitive behaviors, avoidance of eye contact, loss of emotional control, and passive responses to affection. But these are dry facts and figures. If you really want to get your audience involved, you will weave in some examples of children who suffer from autism. One speaker began by telling about Sam, her autistic nephew. My nephew Sam was a delight of our family when he was born, the first grandchild of my parents. He cooed and babbled, smiled at his mom and dad, and grasped for the playthings around his crib. At family dinners on Sunday, we took turns holding him in our arms, feeding him, and singing him to sleep. He seemed like any normal infant in a secure and loving home. Then, shortly before his 2nd birthday, we began to notice unusual behaviors. Sam avoided looking us in the eye, did not seem interested in learning words, and played endlessly with the same toy, rocked back and forth in his chair for hours at a time, and was easily frustrated. My sister took him to a specialist who gave the dreaded diagnosis. Sam was autistic. During the body of the speech, the speaker mentioned Sam twice more to illustrate different aspects of autism. Then at the end of the speech, she brought Sam's story to a hopeful conclusion. We have seen that autism is a very serious disorder whose causes are not well understood and whose effects on families and the lives of the children themselves can be devastating. But we have also seen that early diagnosis and early intervention can help to modify and even turn around the symptoms of autism. I'm happy to say that Sam has benefited from such intervention. From the time he was 2, he has been taught normal behavior patterns through aggressive therapy. Now he is able to participate in his class at the local school. He is also more responsive and affectionate at home. Sam continues to be our delight. It was a powerful ending by putting a human face on a familiar topic. The speaker took autism out of the realm of statistics and medical jargon and brought it home in personal terms. Be creative. Whether you are seeking alternatives to technical language, avoiding abstractions, personalizing ideas, or adapting to the audience's knowledge about the topic, you need to be creative in thinking about ways to achieve your objectives. A good informative speech is not an oral encyclopedia article like any other kind of speech. It requires a healthy dose of creativity. If you look back at the examples on the previous few pages, you will see that all of them involve creative thinking by the speaker. As in these examples, creativity is often a matter of using language imaginatively and resourcefully. But creativity can involve any aspect of an informative speech, including visual aids, as can be seen in the speech on medical robots that is reprinted on pages 294 and through 296. Part of the speech deals with orderly robots, which transport medicine, food, and lab supplies around the hospital without a human by their side. The robots navigate by using light whiskers, invisible beams of sonar, infrared, and laser that constantly scan the environment to avoid collisions. Because the light whiskers are invisible, the speaker needed to find a way to make them visible for his audience. He did so by using a PowerPoint slide in which colored lines representing the light whiskers popped on screen in perfect coordination with the speaker's words. As you can see from video 15.6, it was an effective and creative solution. If like the speaker, you think creatively when constructing your informative speech, you are much more likely to be successful. Sample speech with commentary. The following classroom speech provides an excellent example of how to apply the guidelines for informative speaking discussed in this chapter. Notice how the speaker takes what could be a dry technical topic and makes it interesting. Also pay attention to how crisply the speech is organized and how the speaker uses well-chosen supporting materials and visual aids to develop his ideas. You can view the speech in the online media library for this chapter. Speech. Maureen Schrader lay on the operating table at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey. 4 mechanical arms moved with precision over her abdomen. In one arm was a high-definition camera. The other 3 contained small surgical instruments that made a 5 centimeter incision just below her rib cage. It was a tiny opening, but it was big enough to put a new kidney into Maureen's body. At no point during the surgery did the surgeon actually touch Maureen. In fact, he sat several feet away, peering into the monitor and holding what looked like video game controls. But the work of his hands was digitally recorded and sent to the robotic arms, which mimicked his every movement. The robot became an extension of the surgeon, and together they transplanted the kidney. Robots in the operating room are now a reality, and the next operation you or a family member undergoes may well involve a robot. But surgery is just one of the areas in which robots are changing modern medicine. As a pre-med student interested in becoming a surgeon, I've long been fascinated with medical robots. After researching the topic for this speech, I'd like to introduce to you the world of medical robots. We'll take a look at 3 kinds of robots in particular: orderly robots, remote present robots, and surgical robots. Let's begin with orderly robots. Orderly robots help hospital staff accomplish routine tasks. Their primary function is to transport medicine, food, and lab supplies, and to do so without humans by their side. Here is one of the most popular orderly robots, the Tug, or Tug robot, which, according to its manufacturer, can be found in more than 100 hospitals in the United States alone. A September 2010 story in Discovery News explains how the robot works. Relying on a digital map of the hospital, the robot moves from room to room, picking up and dropping off supplies. It senses people and obstacles by what are called light whiskers, invisible beams of sonar, infrared, and laser. These light whiskers are represented by the colored lines you see in the drawing. They constantly scan the environment to avoid collisions. Tug robots can also communicate with one another about the most efficient route to a location given current hallway conditions. They are highly efficient and make fewer delivery errors than people. Mark Weigel, a director of food services at Bethesda Memorial Hospital in Maryland, notes that the Tug robot never argues with patients, takes no breaks, is always polite, and always on time. But orderly robots are not the only robots transforming modern medicine. Remote present robots allow a doctor to visit with a patient even when the doctor is not in the same room. Remote presence means that the doctor can be present with the patient even when the doctor is in a remote location. Imagine you're sitting in a hospital room when in comes this RP-7. A 2009 story in U.S. News and World Report explains that physicians can pilot these robots from a laptop located anywhere in the hospital or in the world. A screen, camera, microphone, and speaker system, like the ones you see in this photograph, allow the doctor to interview the patient. Hospital staff can even attach medical devices such as electronic stethoscopes to the robot so the doctor can review a patient's vital signs. According to a 2010 article in Hospital Management, the RP7 is used in more than 250 U.S. hospitals and has performed more than 100,000 clinic sessions. They are particularly useful in hospitals with high patient-to-doctor ratio. In addition to orderly robots and remote present robots, a third kind of robot is transforming modern medicine. Surgical robots, like the kind I mentioned at the start of my speech, are increasingly being used in operating rooms around the world. Most popular is the one you see here, the Da Vinci. According to a 2010 article in the Miami Herald, there were more than 1,400 Da Vinci robots in hospitals worldwide, and they are used more than 200,000 operations each year. How does the Da Vinci work? Intuitive Surgical, maker of Da Vinci, explains that the surgeon controls the robot from a remote terminal. You can see the terminal in this photograph. Usually the terminal is a few feet away, as in the photograph, but it can be as far as thousands of miles away. So a surgeon in San Francisco can operate on a patient in Miami. The surgeon controls the robot's arms utilizing an interactive 3D imaging system. But make no mistake, even though the robot is touching the patient, the surgeon is always in control. Doctors love Da Vinci because it dramatically improves the quality of surgical procedures. Dr. Jeffrey Wolf, a head and neck surgeon at the University of Maryland Medical Center, states that Da Vinci gives us unprecedented access with really good 3D visualization. We are now able to perform intricate surgeries in a very small space with great dexterity. Da Vinci also reduces the risk of post-surgery complications, allows for faster healing, and helps patients leave the hospital sooner. In conclusion, we've seen that medical robots are playing an increasingly important role in modern medicine, whether they're running errands for hospital employees, helping physicians connect with their patients, or acting as surgeons' eyes and hands. Medical robots have brought the future into the present. So the next time you find yourself at the hospital, keep your eyes peeled for the kind of technological marvels that used to exist only in science fiction. Medical robots are now a matter of science fact. Commentary. The speaker starts with a richly detailed, extended example that captures attention and interest. As the speaker continues his opening example, he reveals that the mechanical arms mentioned in the first paragraph are actually robotic arms controlled by a surgeon. Here the speaker relates the topic to his audience, establishes his credibility, previews the main points to be discussed in the body of the speech, and provides a transition statement to the body. Now the speaker moves into his first main point, dealing with orderly robots. He illustrates the point by focusing on the tug robot. As you can see from the video of this speech, the speaker uses a creative visual aid to help his audience visualize the light whiskers used by tug robots. The speaker uses expert testimony to explain the benefits of orderly robots. Notice how he identifies the person he is quoting and his credentials before presenting the testimony. The speaker moves into his second main point. He begins with a concise definition of remote presence robots. The word imagine helps draw the audience further into the speech. A photograph shows exactly what a RP-7 remote present robot looks like. Notice how the speaker identifies the source of his statistics and rounds off the numbers. A transition at the beginning of this paragraph signals that the speaker is moving into his third main point. He again uses credible, well-chosen statistics to quantify his ideas. This paragraph provides an excellent example of how to explain visual aids and how to communicate technical information in clear, non-technical language. Because the speaker is not a surgeon, he relies on expert testimony to explain the benefits of Da Vinci surgical robots. As in other parts of the speech, his dynamic delivery creates a strong bond with his audience. In conclusion, signals that the speaker is coming to an end of his speech. He then summarizes the main points developed in the body. The speaker ends on a strong note by stating that medical robots are now a matter of science fact rather than of science fiction. Summary. Speaking to inform occurs in a wide range of everyday situations. Improving your ability to convey knowledge effectively will be valuable to you throughout your life. Informative speeches may be grouped into 4 categories: speeches about objects, speeches about processes, speeches about events, and speeches about concepts. Objects include places, structures, animals, even people. Speeches about objects usually are organized in chronological, spatial, or topical order. A process is a series of actions that work together to produce a final result. Speeches about processes explain how something is made and how something is done, or how something works. The most common types of organization for speeches about processes are chronological and topical. An event is anything that happens or is regarded as happening. Speeches about events are usually arranged in chronological or topical order. Concepts include beliefs, theories, ideas, and principles. Speeches about concepts are often more complex than other kinds of informative speeches, and they typically follow a topical pattern of organization. No matter what the subject of your informative speech, be careful. Do not overestimate what your audience knows about it. Explain everything so thoroughly that they can't help but understand. Avoid being too technical. Make sure your ideas in your language are fully comprehensible to someone who has no specialized knowledge about the topic. Equally important, recognize what is fascinating to you, and recognize that what is fascinating to you may not be fascinating to everybody. It is your job to make your informative speech interesting and meaningful to your audience. Find ways to talk about the topic in terms of your listeners. Avoid too many abstractions. Use description, comparison, and contrast to make your audience see what you are talking about. Try to personalize your ideas and dramatize them in human terms. Finally, be creative in thinking of ways to communicate your ideas.